Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to undergo a massive, fundamental paradigm shift. We're diving into a mental model that will completely change how you view the deeply frustrating organizations, the red tape, and the seemingly broken infrastructure you interact with every single day. If you've ever looked around and felt like the world is just full of processes that make absolutely no sense, well, you are definitely in the right place. Okay, let's dive into this. Think about your everyday life for a second. Have you ever been banging your head against the wall dealing with a system that just completely fails to do what it's supposed to do? Maybe it's a corporate policy that supposedly exists to help you, but in reality, it just throws up endless roadblocks. Or maybe a civic process that feels like it was designed literally just to waste your time. Now, we usually look at these situations and think, wow, this system is incredibly broken. But what if it's actually working exactly as it's designed to? Notice the core conflict staring us right in the face here. On one side, we have an organization's loud, proud, stated intentions. And on the exact opposite side, we have the actual, observable outcomes. For example, an organization might boldly claim that its absolute core values are health and safety. But if you look closely and see that they have a uniquely high rate of accidents and illness, yeah, that's a massive disconnect. The stated principles are totally contradicted by the actual practice. And this disconnect, right here, is exactly where our paradigm shift begins. To figure out how to cut through all this illusion and corporate spin, we're turning to a brilliant British management consultant and cybernetician, basically an expert in how complex systems govern themselves, named Stafford Beer. In his 1979 book, The Heart of Enterprise, Beer formalized a way of looking at complex systems that slices right through the wishful thinking of the people who design them. He realized pretty quickly that complex systems simply cannot be controlled by simple, textbook notions of management. And more importantly, judging a system by what its creators intended it to do, that is a total trap. And this insight led to his famous heuristic, known by the acronym Posiwid. It stands for "the purpose of a system is what it does." Simple, right? But it is a profoundly disruptive idea. Beer basically stated that there is absolutely no point, none whatsoever, in claiming that the purpose of a system is to do something it constantly fails to do. If a system continuously produces a certain result, well then that is its true purpose. And that's regardless of the glossy marketing brochures or the super noble intentions of the people operating it. So the crucial point is really captured in an address Beer gave at the University of Valladolid in 2001. He laid it out like this. According to the cybernetician, the purpose of a system is what it does. This is a basic dictum. It stands for bald fact, which makes a better starting point in seeking understanding than the familiar attributions of good intention, prejudices about expectations, moral judgment, or sheer ignorance of circumstances. In other words, we have to totally drop the moral judgments and the assumptions. We need to look only at the cold, descriptive reality of the outcomes. Now, you might be wondering what this actually looks like in the real world. Well, to see exactly how this works in practice, we don't need to look at abstract mathematics or, massive global networks. In The Heart of Enterprise, Stafford Beer actually grounded this theory by using highly relatable, everyday mini-stories from his own life. Let's look at two specific examples he analyzed to see how Posiwid reveals the hidden reality of the world around us. Take his experience dealing with a car company. They had this specific system for provisioning spare parts by moving them around between different repair shops. From the company's perspective, this system was probably intended to minimize the amount of capital they had tied up in spare parts inventory, right? Makes business sense. But Beer observed the actual behavior. The process was incredibly, painstakingly slow. His car would actually break down in entirely new ways, needing completely different parts before the local garage could even finish the first repair. And this brilliantly illustrates the point. Applying Posiwid from Beer's perspective as the customer, this wasn't a system for repairing cars. It was a highly effective system for not supplying spare parts. Or let's look at his daily commute. Beer lived out in West Wales, and his house was 40 miles away from a mainline railway station. To get there, he had to catch this tiny diesel train. Now, the expected purpose of a train is obviously to facilitate comfortable travel, but Beer observed the bald facts. The train was incredibly noisy, it was jam-packed with tourists, and it had no smoking carriage. So, applying the Posiwid rule to the actual observed outcomes, he concluded that the true purpose of the railway network was to actively discourage him from traveling by rail. And the specific purpose of that little diesel train? Well, it was to prevent him from working or smoking on his journey. Let's move to see how this builds, because Posiwid isn't just a clever observation for complaining about bad customer service. It actually builds into much broader applications across a ton of complex disciplines. For example, it's heavily utilized in systems theory and cybernetics, where interventions are understood strictly by how they affect observed system behavior. It's also applied in biology to understand complex cellular systems, and in management to balance the political, messy understandings of how businesses operate with straightforward, objective views of their real-world impact. What's really fascinating is that different fields interpret the why behind POSIWID in slightly different ways. A cybernetician looks at a system and applies the principle purely to the mechanical dynamics. To them, the system is like a machine that inexorably, inevitably produces its results simply based on how the parts are connected. A management scientist, on the other hand, might look at the exact same system and apply POSIWID to the human element. They see the results as being produced by the self-interest of the actors and the individuals playing roles within that institution. But the beautiful thing is, both lenses neutrally observe the exact same outcome. The system does what it does. So, what does this all mean for us? Well, I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. Look at a frustrating system in your own life right now. Maybe it's at work, maybe at school, or even in your local government. Strip away all of the PR apologies, the fancy mission statements, and the supposedly good intentions. Look only at the bald facts of the outcomes it continuously produces day in and day out. By applying POSIWIDO, what is its actual purpose? Once you start looking at the world this way, I promise you'll never see it the same again. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what the systems around you are really doing.